Continuing with our series of the chronology of world history. 1000 BC, Kingdom of Kush. With the collapse of the Egyptian New Kingdom, the Nubians, who had been subjugated by the Egyptians, regained control of their lands. They founded the independent Kingdom of Kush with its capital at Napata, which is present-day Karima, Sudan. Within only a few centuries, the Nubians controlled Upper Egypt and installed a Kushite dynasty that went on to rule all of Egypt. 1000 BC, King David unites the Israelite tribes and conquers the city of Jerusalem. More on King David. According to the biblical narrative, David was a shepherd and musician who rose to power after killing the Philistine giant Goliath. He succeeded Saul as king of the Israelites and led his people into Jerusalem. 1000 BC, Adena culture starts to develop along the Ohio River in North America. 69 to 936 BC, Tyre prospers under Hiram I. The city of Tyre was perfectly placed for trade on the coast of what is now Lebanon. Under King Hiram I, Tyre became a hub for much of the region's commerce. A major attraction for merchants was the program of building works Hiram initiated, providing warehouse facilities in the fortified city. 950 BC, first temple built in Jerusalem. According to tradition, King David brought the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem. However, it was his son Solomon who had a temple built to house it. When he succeeded to the throne of Israel, the first temple, as it became known, was a spiritual and cultural center of the city, situated on Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount, until it was destroyed by Babylonians in 586 BC. 950 BC, Neo-Assyrian Empire, emerging from a dark age of decline that had afflicted much of the Middle East for more than a century. Assyria began to re-establish its empire by the time Adad-Nirari II came to the throne in 911 BC. The foundations for a Neo-Assyrian Empire had been laid, and under his leadership it conquered much of Mesopotamia and beyond. Its expansion made it the largest and most powerful empire the world had yet seen. 930 BC, after Solomon's death, his kingdom divides into Israel in the north and Judah in the south. 910 BC, Scythia in central Eurasia becomes home to nomadic peoples from the steppes of Asia. 900 to 400 BC, Etruscan civilization. Several city-states began to flourish in northern Italy in the 9th century BC, evolving into a civilization with a distinctive Etruscan culture. This prevailed for several centuries before becoming assimilated into the Roman state. Much of what is known about Etruscan society comes from artworks found in family tombs, including wall paintings, pottery, and bronze sculptures. 900 BC, Phoenicians extend their influence across the Mediterranean, establishing colonies in North Africa and southern Spain. 900 BC, rise of Chavin culture, a civilization that emerged in the northern Peruvian Andes, established its center in the location of modern Chavin de Huantar. The city built here included a complex of religious and ceremonial buildings adorned with typically Andean stone carving. 890 to 824 BCE, Shalmaneser III, throughout his reign from about 859 BC to his death in 824 BC, Shalmaneser III waged a relentless campaign to continue the expansion of the Assyrian Empire began by his father. 900 BC, Olmec culture moves to La Binta after the Olmec city at San Lorenzo was badly damaged, perhaps by environmental change. Its inhabitants set up a new center in La Binta, about 45 miles to the northeast. The new city was built on a grand scale, with paved roads and dominated by a massive city pyramid. Among the numerous artifacts discovered by archaeologists are ceremonial jade axes, sculpture, and pottery. 72 BC, the Temple of Luxor in Egypt is inundated by severe flooding of the Nile. 863 BC, Nimrud becomes the Assyrian capital. The Neo-Assyrian Empire strengthened in the 9th century. When Ashurnashirpal II became king, he embarked on a ruthless campaign of expansion, restoring Assyria to its former glory and power. He moved his capital from Assur to Nimrud, also known as Kalhu, where he built opulent palaces. After his death, his son Shalmaneser III enthusiastically continued in his father's footsteps. 850 BC, the kingdom of Van in modern Armenia asserts its independence from the Assyrian Empire under the reign of King Arami of Aratu. 814 BC, founding of Carthage. Legend surrounds the founding of the city of Carthage by the Phoenicians on the coast of present-day Tunisia. The most enduring account is that of Dido or Alyssa from Tyre, who purchased the land and became its first queen. What is not in doubt, however, is that it evolved from a Phoenician colony into a thriving city-state, the capital of a powerful Carthaginian empire. 800 BC, Vedic period. The composition of Sanskrit texts, the Brahmanas, and the first of the Upanishads marked the beginning of what is known as the later Vedic period of the Indo-Vedic civilization of northern India. These sacred texts, with others, were arranged into collections, the four Vedas, which were the foundation for the Brahmanic religions. The texts were also the cornerstone of the principles of the Kuru regional culture, influencing the development of its hierarchical social structure. 800 BC, the Hellenic people of city-states such as Sparta, Athens, and Thebes spread from mainland Greece to the colonies around the Aegean. 776 BC, the first Pan-Hellenic Olympic Games. According to the tradition, Olympia hosted the first Pan-Hellenic Games. In 776 BC, a religious festival and athletic competition, the Games also had a political purpose, both fostering relationships between participating Greek city-states and rekindling old rivalries. The ancient Olympic Games were held every 4 years and continued even under Roman rule until the 4th century AD. 771 BC, Eastern Zhou dynasty begins in China. After the invasion of the Zhou capital, Haojing, by barbarians, the royal family were forced to flee eastward, making Luoyang the capital of the Eastern Zhou dynasty. This heralded the beginning of a period of decline of the power of the Zhou kings and fragmentation of the region into more autonomous states. The first half of the Eastern Zhou dynasty began known as the Spring and Autumn period, 722 to 41 BC, named after an official chronicle of the state of Lu, the Spring and Autumn Annals. 753 BC, founding of Rome. The enduring foundation myth of the city of Rome tells the story of the twin sons of the god Mars, Romulus and Remus, left to die on the banks of the Tiber as babies. They were rescued and suckled by a she-wolf. They returned to the site as adults, intent on building a city there. A dispute on whether to locate the city led to the death of Remus, on which Romulus founded Rome on the Palatine Hill in 753 BC and reigned as its first king. 750 BC, King Pi of Kush invaded Egypt and established a Nubian 25th dynasty. 750 BC, the epic poems of Homer are written down for the first time using a Phoenician-style alphabet. More on Homer. Author of the Iliad and the Odyssey, Homer is a legendary figure. As part of an oral tradition, it is possible that poems ascribed to him are in fact the works of several authors over a long period. 745 to 727 BC, the Assyrian Empire spans across Mesopotamia out to the Mediterranean and from Scythia in the north to the Arabian Peninsula. 720 BC, construction of the pyramids at Meroe. In the 8th century, the capital of the kingdom of Kush was at Napata, but several members of the royal family originated from further south in the city of Meroe. This became the chosen burial site for this side of the family, and a tomb complex was built there in 720 BC. The pyramids containing the tombs were in the Nubian style with steep sides. 100 BC, expansion of Nineveh. Sennacherib came to the throne of the Neo-Assyrian Empire in 705 BC. As well as continuing the expansion of the empire, he set about moving the capital of the city of Nineveh. This involved an extensive program of renovation in the old city centered around a palace without a rival, making it one of the largest and most important cities in the world at that time. 685 to 668 BC, Sparta emerges as a dominant power in Greece. Sparta regarded strength and discipline as ideals and produced an army of fearless fighting men, conspicuous in the battlefield in their distinctive battle dress and crested helmets. As a result, in the 7th century BC, it emerged as the foremost military power in Greece, valuable as an ally and dangerous as an enemy. 689 BC, the city of Babylon is destroyed by the Assyrian emperor Sennacherib. 671 BC, Egyptian capital Memphis is captured by Assyrian king Esarhaddon and is regained by the Egyptians 8 years later. 668 BC, Ashurbanipal becomes Assyrian emperor, sometimes proclaimed as the last great king of Assyria. Ashurbanipal came to power when the Assyrian power was at its height. During his reign, he established Nineveh as the cultural, political, and commercial center of the empire, with an extensive library housing texts such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and buildings lavishly decorated with statues and bas-reliefs. 660 BC, legendary first emperor of Japan. According to tradition, Jimmu, a descendant of Amaterasu, the sun goddess, became the first emperor of Japan after conquering the whole country. There's little historical evidence of his existence, and the legend appears to be a conflation of mythology and the real events. Nevertheless, the supposed date of his accession, February 11th, is still celebrated in Japan as National Foundation Day. 621 BC, the so-called Age of Tyrants begins in many Greek city-states. 620 BC, Draco sets out the first law code in Athens, hence the word draconian. 620 to 600 BC, true coins are used for currency for the first time in Lydia, which is modern Turkey. 612 BC, the collapse of the Neo-Assyrian Empire is triggered by the destruction of Nineveh by rebelling Babylonians and Medes. 7th century BC, China's 100 schools of thought philosophy flourished in the Eastern Zhou period in China. The diverse systems that emerged became known as the 100 schools of thought and included such thinkers as Laozi, the founder of Taoism, Confucius or Confucius, founder of Confucianism, Mozi or Moism, and Han Fizi, legalism. I appreciate you joining me for this edition of the Chronology of History as we're working our way through different historical events throughout history. See you next time.